Hello, this is a screencast about Dropbox. Your Dropbox is your location for students to submit work, from internal assessments to daily formative work, as well as summative IAs, mock exams, and other such items. By going to the Dropbox from my psychology course, you're able to see the folder list. Dropbox sections are called folders, and each folder represents a specific item a student was required to turn in. You can see that for week 35 there were 3 items that students had to submit, 2 for 36, a lot for 37, and so forth. You're able to get a bird's eye view of what's happening by looking at the folder list. For example, total files submitted, unread files, which means these are ones that the instructor has not looked at yet, flagged files, which you are allowed to do. You can mark files if they're the next things that you'd like to grade, or there's an important reason that you should get to one next. You can set end dates, and I'll show you how to do the restrictions so that you can shut off, for example, SAQs, and in psychology that's a test, formative or summative test, and so I leave them open for only small periods of time. You can get straight to the actual editing of the discussion by clicking on the pencil next to it, but what I'd like to show you from here are a few other things. On this main page, you can create a new folder anytime you want to collect information from your students, and you do this by selecting New Folder. Within here, there's a few things that you do have to do. You have to rename it. You have to enable it for plagiarism detection, if that's what you'd like. If you don't click this, you cannot use turnitin.com, which I'll explain more in a moment. You can create group submission folders if you like, and then group the categories. For example, if I select group submission, I can then go and look at groups I've already created and use those. This means that students would have one spot to submit an item instead of what can be chaotic, having 1 out of the 5 students submit and the others not sure if it happened. With individual folders, you can't do anything here. Category is really selecting the term involved, and then the rubric. No rubric is selected, but if you wanted to use a grade item, you could create a new grade item, and you can select a number of points that it's out of. Now, in a lot of cases, Pamoja has preset grade items, rubrics, and the number that it's out of to correspond to a rubric for the course. For example, if you had a written assignment with a 10-point rubric or an 8-mark rubric, such as the SAQ for psychology, this could be out of 8 or out of 10, and that way the number that you give will correspond to the rubric grade. This can also be associated with the grade book, allowing this score to go straight to the grade book, which is really nice as a feature. You do have some other options at the bottom. You can attach a file to the Dropbox, and you can record audio. I really recommend that you don't record audio. We have a small margin of space on that, and if you all get into the habit of recording audio in D2L, we'll fill up our capacity pretty fast. So I recommend instead using Snagit or Jing or Camtasia or something else. You can have it so that students can only submit an item once, or they can submit it unlimited times. And then with submissions, you can keep all submissions overwrite, so if they write over, even if it's unlimited, if they overwrite by submitting a new one, the old one goes away. Or you can keep it as only one, which corresponds to the one file per student. So they would only be able to submit once with one file. And with only one submission allowed, if they forgot to make their attachment, they would not be able to resubmit. So I recommend keeping it on keep all submissions. Now, the other point in here is restrictions, and so this you can do when you have either a new forum or an old one, but you can do a start and an end date. And what's really important is you can also have this display in the calendar. And the calendar is on the course homepage, and I'll show you in just a second. This means that the students will have full access to know when the Dropbox will open and close, meaning that they're held more accountable. Something else that's of interest is the special access. Now, I highly recommend to not even bother with release conditions. That's something we don't use. But with special access, you can allow users with special access to submit assignments outside the dates. So if a student gives you a legitimate excuse or has an issue that comes up and they're unable to, all you have to do is click on Add Users to Special Access, find their name, and click Save. And that person would then have an extension that you can add right here for access properties, where you can change the date and give them a separate time. And then I'm pretty sure that in the calendar, if that's what you select, that one special access they'll have access to that date as well. So that's pretty interesting. Having gone back to the main folder list for Dropboxes, I'd like to show you another part. If I go to week 37 and look at the SAQ that was submitted, I can see a few more things. I can view by user or group, and then I can search for a student. Now, with classes of 25, this isn't that complicated. They're all right here, and they're typically in the correct order or the same order they always are, so it's not a big deal. Something that's interesting, though, is that you can change the submission to users with submissions, users without, and users with preview. Or for feedback, you can show everyone or users with or without feedback. So if you know you've only graded half of a set of assignments, you can then just get the ones that haven't been graded available. One of the other things that you would notice is that the student has submitted work. They can leave comments, they can attach a document, and then on the right side of the screen, you can see that this was in fact submitted on October 15th. Feedback was left on October 17th. And then about 9 days later, the student actually read the feedback. Now this is really important because often we'll have students who say, hey, you haven't graded my work, I don't know what I'm doing, or schools may contact you. And a simple screenshot of this solves that problem pretty well. Now, I need to show you how to enable the Turnitin.com. And so these small percentage scales here are for a reason. And I've only done a few of these so that I can show you how it works. When you have an assignment submitted and you have this, it looks like a hard drive with a green arrow or a box. If I hover over it, it says Submit File for Plagiarism Detection. If I click on it, it disappears and it's in process. If I came out and went back in, it would show a different icon showing me that it's still in process. Sometimes this can take up to a day, typically about an hour. Now once it's complete and you come in, you will get these percentages that allow you to see the originality reports for these different Turnitin.com submissions. So if I actually click on this and go to Turnitin.com and look at the document viewer, what you can see is that the correlation of the percentage that's marked is correlating to someone else who submitted something to Pamoja. But the only thing that's really counting is the question. And that's not a bad thing. And if I look through the rest of this SAQ, I can see that there's no cheating going on here. Not with anyone that we've done within our Pamoja courses or anyone else that's submitted any work through Turnitin. So this is a safe item. Now you can do some grading and remark and peer marking in here, and please feel free if you know Turnitin or you'd like to explore it, go ahead. But we typically stay within the course in order to do these things. When I'm in the folder list or folder submissions section, I can see another one that says Edit Folder. I can show you I'm still on the same list, but if I click on Edit Folder, there's a few options that you need to know about. When I scroll down, I'm able to look at plagiarism detection options. And if I want to make sure that it's happening for this assignment, automatic plagiarism detection on all submissions. Or I can then choose other things like allow the students to see the originality report, which is the report I just showed you that correlated theirs to another assignment. I typically don't let students see this unless there's a major problem, and then I'll go through it with them. So this is where you can set up some of the plagiarism detection items. That's the basics of Dropbox. It's also in some cases associated with the gradebook. And so when I submit a score out of 10 or 8, as I mentioned earlier, it will show up in the gradebook. The problem is the feedback, if it's in a document, so for example, if a student submitted an essay that you write on, and then you copy it back in, the feedback for the student, that does not automatically go to the Dropbox, and so, to the gradebook. So oftentimes it's important when you're looking at the assignments, if I look at the feedback that was left here for Alicia, you can see that what she's received on this scale is a 7 out of 10. This was before we directly correlated the SAQ to the actual rubric out of 8. I have left her a simple message that says, please see attached for grade and feedback, Mr. W. It's important that you sign your feedback. You need to put your name on the feedback that's given. It will help us to be clear about when and who is given feedback. But you can see here that I've attached a document that has her score, a copy of the rubric with highlights and comments on why she scored where she did, as well as feedback on her actual assignment. Once I've done this and click Save, then Alicia is able to see that I've left the feedback here and can look at it. So this is the basics of how this works. Another really interesting feature is you can email a student directly from here. And so if I look over these, I can email selected users. So if I know that these two students have not submitted, I can simply do their names, and then if I click that, I'm now emailing those two students to tell them you haven't submitted this. It's a quick feature within D2L that allows you to communicate unsubmitted work to students. So I hope that's been helpful, and those are some of the basics of the Dropbox.